3 in the last part of our countdown of the preseason BLCS power rankings. Today we look at teams 4 all the way up to 1, and as I mentioned in yesterday's video, we're currently in the middle of Tier 2 here with the next team on our list, which will be team number 4, and then after that, teams 2, 3, 3, 2, 1 will be the start of a new tier, will be the top tier of this league, and the favorites to vie for a championship. But yesterday with Fulton being at 5 and the 4 teams we have today, these are the 5 main contenders for a championship this year, for a BLCS championship. The teams that we expect not only to make a run in the playoffs, but certainly to make a run in the playoffs and to vie for that championship. So no more waiting around. Let's get on ahead into it and start with team number 4. Number 4, the Brooklyn Dodgers. That's right, last year's number 1 team, and a team that won the AL and made a nice run again in the postseason before losing in the championship round. The Brooklyn Dodgers this year slots in at number 4. That is certainly not to say that this is a very good team. When you look, starting on the offense in the infield, getting Tom Murphy in the draft was a nice pickup for them, a guy that can hit for some power if he plays enough in Colorado. And then you go down the line, you got Will Myers, who had a great season. You had Trey Turner, who had a good half of the season last year. Michael Franco's had a good year, and Correa's put together 2 years. I think the theme here, some of the pitching, but especially here on offense, is these right now, it's stacked with a lot of one-year wonders, in that guys that have really put together a strong season or a strong half season, but we need to see more. And so the potential here is for this team to run away with the league, but we haven't seen enough of it yet. Like I said, Will Myers had a great season, finally reaching his potential last year. He needs to do that again. Trey Turner had a monster half of a year. He needs to put together, he won't duplicate what he did last year. You can't just multiply all those numbers by 2 and expect to get that outcome, but we certainly expect him to be a fantastic player. And then Michael Franco has had a good year. Correa is the exception here because he has put together 2 nice back-to-back years, and we think that he's a top 5 shortstop and will continue to be a top 5 shortstop. But there's a lot of potential here in the offense, in the infield, to do a lot of big things. You look at the outfield, this is the best outfield utility spot in the league. When you look at Bryce Harper, Giancarlo Stanton, George Springer, and Miguel Cabrera, Harper had a monster year in 2015 and took a slight step back last year. He needs to put together another strong season here for Brooklyn. Stanton just needs to stay healthy. This is a guy with all-world potential, but has not been able to stay on the field, especially come playoff time or our playoff time late in the season when teams need him most. Springer has been a very good outfielder, but we're just waiting on that breakout into superstar potential. And then Cabrera is just Mr. Consistency, and you know exactly what you're going to get from him. I still don't think this is we're at the time where he's starting to fall off. I don't think it's going to be this year, and I expect him to put together another good year. On the bench, you've got Daniel Murphy, who plays first, second, and third base, first and second eligibility, and could pick up some other eligibilities during the season. So it's nice to have a guy with some flexibility on your bench who had a very, very good season last year. But again, it's just one season. We need to see more. The pitching staff here is where Brooklyn could struggle this year and what could keep them out of a championship run. Carrasco is the best pitcher on the staff and will need to pitch like an SP1 here for this team. When you look at the rest of the staff, it's a lot of guys with great potential but just haven't done it yet. You look at Danny Norris, James Paxton, Robbie Ray, Taijuan Walker, Carlos Rodon. All of these guys are potential breakouts, and surely 1 or 2 of them will break out and have a very good season, but Brooklyn here is relying on 5 guys to break out. They did make a trade for Alex Cobb coming back from injury. That potentially could be a very big deal for them as far as just having somebody else there who's solid and has done it before. But right now, this pitching staff is just expecting, a lot of guys to break out. If they do, this team is the favorite. If he gets strong pitching, that offense is so good that this team could run away with the AL. However, if it goes the other way, I don't know if the pitching is strong enough or is so weak that I don't think it's going to be able to keep up with the offense. The offense isn't so strong that it can just overcome, a pitching staff that doesn't give it any help. So that's really why Brooklyn fell here to the number 1 spot. And then you look at impact rookies, there are none. And so this was the only F grade that I gave, mainly because there was nobody to put on a list here. There is nobody that we expect to come up and make any impact for Brooklyn. So the roster that you see, barring trades and waiver claims, is the roster that you're going to get this year. They're not getting help from the farm like they have in years past when they've made their big runs, is they've always gotten some help somewhere from the farm. So a very good team, a very solid team, but it's all going to come down to what happens here with the starting pitching, and does this team get enough in the rotation, enough big breakouts to make a push at another championship. Number 3, the Athens Athletics. So now we've reached the top tier of our countdown, the top 3 teams. These teams could have really gone in any order. I kind of moved them around a good bit, but number 3 here is where Athens finally fell. You look at this team, once again, the offense is incredible. Second-rate infield, second-ranked outfield. So we'll go ahead and get into that. On the infield, you've got Rizzo, you've got Altuve, Arenado, and Russell. Tremendous talent at the corners with Rizzo and Arenado, guys that are cornerstones. And then Altuve is, in my opinion, the second best player in fantasy baseball. So much talent here. Addison Russell, we're just waiting on that breakout year. I think this year could be it. And then Contreras is enough at catcher to carry in a position that you don't really, expect or need that much. So it's, unless you've got a Posey or a Hosmer, but Contreras is certainly enough here. And then you go to the outfield, you look at Betts and Polanco and Yelich and Benintendi. So much talent here. Betts is also arguably the number 2, but in my opinion, the number 3 player in fantasy baseball. So they have on this roster in Athens 2 of the top 3 players in fantasy baseball on this offense. Yelich continues to get better. Polanco continues to get better if he can stay healthy. I know he had some hamstring and some shoulder injuries last year. If he's healthy this year, could be in for a monster year. And then Benintendi is the best prospect in all of baseball. Is coming up right away for Athens, going to get in that utility spot, and could be a 20-20 guy with a very good average right out the gate. And then on the bench with Alex Bregman sitting there at third base, so there is utility flexibility here. Bregman obviously hopefully won't need to play third base with Arenado in front of him, but is a source of power and could either be a trade piece or could slot in the utility spot just to give some flexibility or provide some power to this offense that is already so good. You look at the pitching staff, again, it's very good. Maybe not, as good as the Athens pitching staffs of old when they, year in and year out always had the best pitching. But again, a top 5 staff here. When you look at Sale and Verlander and Tanaka, 3 very good pitchers. Verlander bounced back incredibly last year and was really a fantasy monster. Sale, we don't know how much of a hit he'll take going to Boston, but he already wasn't in a great park in Chicago, so we don't expect the numbers to change too much. And then the back end, Michael Fulmer was, I believe, Rookie of the Year. If he can pitch close to what he was last year, I think he probably pitched a little better than who he is, but can still, as your 4th best pitcher, is very good. And then Keuchel, I don't know what he is, but I don't expect much. And then John Gray is a great strikeout guy, which he'll need to be in Colorado. And if you can play the right matchups, play it when he's not pitching at Coors Field, or pick the right teams in Coors Field, is a very capable pitcher. So a little top heavy. They need to find figure out who their 5th starter is, whether it's going to be Gray, Keuchel, or maybe somebody else. But certainly enough talent here to get it done in the starting rotation. As far as impact rookies, Ozzie Albies is maybe the only guy that might get called up this year, and we don't expect Athens to call him up. We expect him to stay in the minor league spot, so really not a lot of help here coming from the farm. And that might have been part of the reason why Athens ultimately fell into the 3rd spot. But sliding over to the NL, immediately becoming the favorite in that division. Not too shabby here for this franchise. We expect them to win the regular season crown in the NL and be one of the favorites to take home a championship this year in 2017. Number 2, the Raleigh Rampage. So coming in at number 2 is a team that completely rebuilt itself during last year's offseason and still managed to find itself only a half game out of first place in the AL. A lot of talent here. Probably a more quiet offseason for Raleigh than what we've seen the past 2 or 3 years. We're used to seeing a flurry of trades. They definitely made some big moves, getting Machado and getting, a couple of pitching, but not just, the sheer numbers weren't as big, and I kind of set pat in some certain areas. Let's go ahead and look at the offense. When you look at the infield, and you've got Real Muto and Hanley Ramirez at first base, LeMahieu and the Manny Machado, as we talked about, and Ledmans Diaz. There's some nice flexibility here. Real Muto is a top 6 catcher or so. We mentioned catcher's not that important, but it's nice that he gets you some stolen bases, especially for a team that's lacking in that area. His 10 to 12 stolen bases could make some difference. Hanley Ramirez is a 30 home run, 100 RBI guy. Is going to be taking Ortiz's spot in Boston's lineup, so we expect big numbers. LeMahieu is simply an average and runs guy in Colorado. This is probably the weak point of this infield. Then you look at Machado. What's nice here is with Raleigh having Castellanos at third and Ledmans Diaz at short, and Manny being able to play either position, Raleigh can kind of play who's hot between Castellanos and Diaz and put Machado in the other spot. Or if one of them happens to break out, Machado can go in the other position, or maybe they've got some trade maneuvers they can make with these 3 guys. But getting Machado, who's a top 10 player, the loss of Turner, I think, is going to hurt them in stolen bases and some other categories. But it's tough to not make a move when you can get a guy who's can hit for a high average and can hit for 40 home runs. When Machado does, I think the key here for Raleigh is, will he steal bases like he did 2 years ago when he stole 20, or is it going to be like last year when he didn't steal any? He stole 0 bases. That can make the difference again for a team that's lacking in steals. You look at the outfield, solid outfit here. Number 1 player in baseball, Trout. There's really not much we need to say there. Cargo is a top 10 to 12 outfielder. Continues to play well in Colorado. Raleigh really needs him not to move or leave Colorado in the middle of the season, or at least if he does, to move to another viable park. We saw what happened with Tulo. I don't think that will happen here with Cargo, but certainly could if he gets into the wrong situation. The outfield utility spot is rounded up with Matt Kemp, who hit 30 home runs and 100 RBIs last year, and is going to hit cleanup in a Braves lineup that's getting better with Swanson and Phillips up top, and then Freddie Freeman in front of him, presumably. Matt Kemp could be, a surprising, good source of power numbers here for this team. And then Santana in the OBP league is more valuable, which helps here. And again, hit 30 home runs and can drive in 100. So there's a lot of guys on this team that, maybe are a little older when you look at Hanley and Kemp and Santana, but guys that have the potential to put up 30 home runs and hit 100 RBIs, which as we get into the pitching, you'll see this offense just needs to do enough in enough categories to help out the pitching, which is very strong. And so now as we get into the pitching, this is the top-ranked staff and the top-ranked bullpen in the league. When you look at this pitching staff with Bumgarner and Strasburg and Carlos Martinez and Zach Greinke and Cole Hamels and Steven Matz as the 6th starter, you've got 5 guys that could potentially be aces for a lot of teams, and then Matz just needs to get healthy. And maybe Raleigh only gets 140 to 150 innings from Matz, so maybe that's all they need here is just the spot starts on weeks where they need that 6th start from him. So not overly reliant, but the top 5 here are incredibly good. The bullpen is also the best in baseball. I know we haven't talked a lot about bullpens here, but we do in this situation for this team just because of Chapman and Betances and Kenley Jansen and Samwon O and Brock, just guys, there's so much potential here to have 5 or even 6 relievers if Carl Edwards or one of these guys gets enough innings that they could have 5 or 6 guys that can pitch 80 to 100 strikeouts and with a good ERA and getting holds and saves that make this pitching even better. So the key for Raleigh this year, as far as not getting a lot from the farm, David Paulino may come up on the pitching side, but I don't think they'll need him. I think he'll stay down. And on offense, maybe Lewis Brinson or A.J. Reed. Brinson could be the guy that makes the difference here as an outfielder if something happens on their outfield. then maybe he needs to be a late call-up and certainly going to be a star, but I'm thinking that Raleigh probably doesn't want to call him up quite yet. There's some nice bench depth here with Mazzaro sitting on the bench and Castellanos, and Tommy Joseph is a 30 home run hitter on the bench. So there's how Raleigh got into this second spot, and what's going to carry them this year is there's a lot of depth here on offense so that they can move the pieces and get the right lineups on the right days. The offense just has to do enough to let this pitching staff really be the star. And so if they can get enough pitching categories, the offense just has to do enough to maybe get those 8-6 or 8.5, 5.5 wins for the season. So, they're not going to dominate anybody with this offense, but they can do enough and dominate enough on pitching just to continue to rack up victories. And that's how this team makes a run in the AL and eventually into a championship. Number 1, the New Jersey Jays. Surprise, I knew that this team was better just glancing at the roster, during the offseason a couple of times. I would look at it and go, wow, this is a pretty good team. And then I started doing the rankings and realized, wow, this is one of the better teams. And then started really, putting this thing together and really studying and realized this is the best team in the league. And I know that comes with a dreaded curse of being the number 1 team in the power ranking, and the front office it may not be happy about that. But at the same time, you got to like it anytime you're at the top of a power rankings going into a season that you're looked at to be the best team. So if we go ahead and jump in, dive in on the offense and the infield, Freddie Freeman, Odor, Bryant, and Story, 4 guys that are in the top 3 and 4 of their position. Freeman had a monster year, and as we talked about with Matt Kemp, is in an improving Braves lineup and should be even better. Can hit the home runs and the average again, but maybe the RBIs and run numbers go up. Odor had a monster year power-wise. I don't know that he gets to there, but certainly can hit between 25 and 30, maybe 31, 32 home runs, which from a second baseman is incredible. Chris Bryant is the NL MVP, reigning MVP. We know exactly what he is and is one of the best players in all of baseball. And then Trevor Story is kind of the X factor here on this offense. Is he what we saw last year? Is he going to be that source of 25 to 30, 35 home runs? Can he stay healthy long enough to do that hitting out in Colorado? If he can, this offense can be very difficult to deal with. Moving to the outfield, maybe some aging players here, but so much talent. When you look at Adam Jones and Justin Upton and Nelson Cruz and Ian Desmond moving to Colorado, he will be even better than he was last year in Texas. Nelson Cruz, when you look over the last 4 or 5 years of fantasy baseball, has been the number 2 outfielder behind Trout for 4 or 5 years now. I can't remember which one it is. Just super consistent, 40 home runs, a lot of RBIs, going to hit for a good enough average. And then Adam Jones is aging, but continues to be a very good player and can still hit 280 and drive in 80 to 90 and hit for 20 to 22, 23 home runs. And then finally, Justin Upton needs to bounce back and be what he was, but again, a good source of power. So this offense is incredible. I mean, it really is, and is one of the best in the league. You look at the bench. Jock Peterson and Byron Buxton are 2 young outfielders. We're just waiting on them to kind of put it all together. And if they do, they can, there's hope in the future here for New Jersey. I don't think they'll need either of those 2 guys this year, barring some sort of injury or disaster. But it's nice to know that you've got some depth in your outfield and some young guys coming up with some of the older players that they have. You look at the pitching staff. I battled back and forth between this rotation and Raleigh's rotation being number 1 in the rankings. Syndergaard, David Price, DeGrom, Salazar, Tehran, and then Rich Hill. Just an incredible staff, very balanced, a lot of strikeouts. I think the keys here are DeGrom staying healthy, and then Tehran had a very nice bounce back year. He needs to keep that up, but it's really the innings that he's going to get from Salazar and Rich Hill. Is how many innings? Rich Hill is. The Dodgers know they only need to get 120 to maybe 130 innings from him. When are they going to get those innings? When is New Jersey going to get those innings? Is it going to be enough late in the season, come playoff time, And then Salazar is usually only pitching 170 innings a year. New Jersey really needs him to get to that point to where he's pitching, more like 185 to 190 innings to get the strikeout numbers up, just to get a little bit more. So he may have to squeeze the orange a little bit to get everything out of this staff. But this staff is extremely good, and can certainly make a case for the best rotation in all of the BLCS. And then impact rookies. This is really what pushed this team over the top and into the number one spot. You look at Jose Peraza, will be the starting second baseman in Cincinnati. Should hit for a good average, should steal a lot of bases, also has shortstop eligibility, so it gives them a little bit of flexibility there on the infield. Adames may come up for Tampa Bay. Don't think he's a guy that's going to make an impact so much this year. But then in the pitching staff, Blake Snell, John Musgrove, two more guys that can bolster this staff, whether it's the innings restrictions that we talked about or maybe some injuries. They've got two guys that can come up and hopefully pitch well and help the staff if needed. I mean, obviously you hope that you can run with what you got, but things always happen. But it's nice to know you've got a couple pitchers here in the rotation if necessary, or to eat up some innings, for Rich Hill or Salazar, some of these guys that may not pitch as much. So this is the number one team in our rankings this year, and this is the team that is now the favorite, sliding over to the AL. There was this big realignment at the end of last year to move some teams over to try to create some balance, and then you look at it, and 3 of the top 4 teams in the power rankings this year are in the AL again. So when you look at New Jersey and Raleigh and Brooklyn, the rest of the AL is really going to have to fight to try to get into a third spot here in get that third spot in the playoffs and to try to grab a wild card spot. It's going to make it more difficult, which is a shame because there's some really good teams at the bottom of the AL, in this rankings that should be making runs at playoffs, but it's tough when you're dealing with the number 1, 2, and 4 team in the power rankings in your division. The NL is a little more open. Athens is clearly the favorite. Fulton is right behind them. And then there's a bit of a drop-off. And then, as we talked about, it could be an exciting race between Bronx, Charleston, and even Austin to try to get that third playoff spot. And then Hartford kind of bringing up the rear. But I think management has done a good job of putting some young pieces on this on their roster to, maybe improve themselves and should make the right moves during the season, again, to build towards the future when some of these other teams start to decline with older players or whatever. So I hope you enjoyed these rankings. I'm sure we're going to get a lot of talk about it, and I'm looking forward to a great season. I'm hoping these video power rankings may be like a bi-weekly thing we do during the season, depending on the feedback I get and if I have the time to put them together. But I've really enjoyed doing this this year. I think this new format has worked really well, and good luck to everyone on the upcoming season. And congratulations to the holders of the curse, the New Jersey Jays, and the number 1 team in the 2017 preseason BLCS Power Rankings.